Hi, I'm Karyn Grant, and today I'm going to teach you how to make a loaf of sourdough bread. I never make just one loaf though, because I make them in threes. They fit better in those Dutch ovens that you'll be seeing more of later to do three in a loaf. So it's conserving time and energy to just go ahead and make three, but we're going to do one today because I've had a lot of friends that have said, oh, if you would just start this, then I would follow you. So I'm going to do this for my best friends and hope that when you see this, you will feel like you can do this too. Several months before my mother passed away, I started making her bread. She had made bread all of her life. Christmas Day was the only day I really remember her making white bread. And I loved her homemade white bread. And she made it in round loaves, which she called shepherd's bread. And I'll just grab this loaf. And this is what her loaves looked like. It was shepherd's bread. And when I asked her, why did you name it shepherd's bread? She said, that's what the shepherds ate as they waited for baby Jesus to be born. So that's what we eat on Christmas Day. So before she passed away, she was still healthy, 93. And I thought, I'm going to start making my mom bread because, of course, she's not making it for herself anymore. But I decided I would make her shepherd's bread, but I wanted to add sourdough to it. And so today you're going to learn how to make shepherd's bread, sourdough style, in a round loaf. And I cook them in 6 5-quart Dutch ovens. And that's how I do it. So we're going to start with just pouring the 2 cups of water, and this makes approximately a 3-pound loaf. So I put 2 cups of water, 2 teaspoons of Himalayan pink salt, and then the starter. And for those of you who have struggled with starter, once you get it going, it's not hard if you will just feed it every day. It's like having a little pet and you need to feed it every day. So then we just put a generous heaping, which is what this is, a generous heaping cup of sourdough starter. Then we start to add the flour. Now it takes about 4 cups of flour, so I don't add it all at once. I'm just going to add enough to get starter mixing, and I'm going to start with this wooden spoon. Okay, I wash my hands about 10 times through this process, and for me this is just like such a beautiful, mindful thing to do because I had grandmothers and great-grandmothers who made their own bread and who didn't use electronics to stir it. I just feel like it just feels more loved when I give this if it's done by hand. So you can see that the starter's mixing in, the salt is mixing in, and I just need to finish adding the flour. 3 little basic ingredients, salt, water, and flour is all that goes into this bread. So I'm just going to add the rest of this flour. I may end up needing a little more, but that's okay. And we get it all mixed in. And it's so fun. It's so fun to give this as a gift because when I give this as a gift, I feel like I am sending love with every little loaf. I feel like I'm giving away a part of my heart and my time and my energy, and I often get up early in the morning to do this. You can see this is a very shaggy dough, and that's okay because in a minute I'm going to start kneading this with my hands. And if you don't like to get your hands doughy, then go ahead and use some gloves, but I'm going to go ahead and just start mixing this in. You can see this is a very shaggy dough. You don't want to mix this too much because we're not trying to activate the gluten. As a matter of fact, the sourdough really consume a lot of that gluten. So we just want to get it into a shaggy state and mix it. I saw a video where a girl was pounding her bread. And I thought, oh, I feel so sorry for that dough, because it just looked like she was taking out all of her anger and her aggressions on it. But this is very lovingly created. And when you look at the history of bread, breaking bread and going back thousands of years, bread and sharing bread and giving bread and breaking bread together, even all the religions that use bread as a sacrament. So we're going to just take that loaf now, the way it is, shaggy but a little more mixed up, and I'm just going to put it in here. This will fit 3 loaves. You can see that this dough back here has been raising overnight. And so next I'm going to show you how to form a loaf after you've let it raise, because you want that sourdough to ferment and you want it to create all that bacteria that makes it so healthy for your microbiome. And so that's what we're going to do next. Now comes the fun part. Actually, it's all fun to me. I don't know why this brings me so much joy, because it's creative and I have so much fun. Like, for instance, this loaf right here has a package of Lipton onion soup, and tonight we're having French dip sandwiches with this as toast. And I'll let you know at some point how that turned out. My sister-in-law just called and she said, I love that cute little loaf with all the ridges. And she goes, that's my favorite. And so it's just fun to experiment with the shapes and the sizes. But here we go. Do this and just flour your counter and then pour this 3 loaves that you've made. And I make them one at a time. I haven't built up that much muscle strength to mix all that dough on my own. And so now we've got this big lump of dough. Okay, and I love this guy. This makes it so easy to just slice through your dough. You can weigh it. I'm not going to weigh it right now. I'm going to just slice this and see, hopefully that these loaves turn out the same, because we want them to bake the same. These 3 loaves will go in the same oven. So I just start to form my loaves. And this guy looks bigger than this one, so I'm going to take that one back. And okay. Now, when you're doing your dough, again, you don't want to handle it too much. You're not trying to knead it and just have too much to do with it, because it's just a very light dough. And for some reason, people that eat this bread tell me, your sourdough is different. It is light. It's very light. I know that there's people that like the really heavy, crunchy crusts. I like the more soft, crispy crust, because it doesn't jab you in the roof of your mouth when you're trying to eat it. And the inside is so soft. This is more of a melt in your mouth sourdough. And I know that the starter makes a big difference. So depending on the atmosphere in our homes, depending on the kind of bacteria that's in the air, is really what is going to create. So we're just tucking it in. And I am a massage therapist, so I think that's why I really love kneading, because it just reminds me of massage. I just get to form these loaves, and this is going to be in its little round, and I'll be able to tell if it's the same size. And if it gets a bubble, like you can see some little bubbles, that's okay, because that just creates more lightness in the dough. Now I can see that this one's a little bit bigger than that one. So I'm just gonna start to roll and tuck. Everybody does it so differently. And yet, you know what? I see people all the time measuring exactly. You could see that that was a heaping 4 cups of flour that I put in there. And I didn't measure it exactly. And sometimes I probably have 2 more tablespoons of water, but I just adjust it because now I know how my dough is supposed to feel. And when it has the right texture, then I know that it's perfect. And this, for me, is perfect. This is what a Loaf feels like, before it goes into the oven, that has this soft crust that's still crispy and then that's soft inside. So it's okay. One may be a little bit bigger than the other, but that's still okay. So here we have our 3. I have heart-shaped Dutch ovens that I used this morning that I love to use. Those are fun because when I give gifts, I can give gifts of comfort. There's so many people that have experiences with just receiving a loaf of bread, and I'm going to tell you a story about how I got interested in creating sourdough bread. So we had just moved to Mapleton, and I was really missing my mother. I hadn't seen her for a while. It had been COVID, and so we were not allowed to go see her. And I was very sad because I just wanted to go and nurture her. I wanted to massage her hands. I wanted to just go and just be a nurturing daughter, but I wasn't allowed to see her. And so one night it was raining. We had just gotten here. We didn't know a soul, and we weren't going to church because my husband couldn't wear masks. There was just a bunch of circumstances. But one night, as I was sitting there, I thought, it's a rainy night. I just wish I had a cup of peppermint tea and my mom's homemade bread. That would just feel so loved right now. And the doorbell rang in the middle of a thundering, rainy night. The doorbell rang, and it was a man that I had never seen before. He was probably a man from the church. It turned out that he was a man from our church. And he was carrying an umbrella, and in his hand he had a hot loaf of sourdough bread. And it was right after I had just thought, I miss my mom, and I just want homemade bread and a cup of tea, because that reminds me of her. And there he was standing there. And in that moment I thought, someday I'm going to be that person that shows up at the right time with a loaf of bread for someone who's missing someone, who's having a hard time, or just needs to know that they're loved for no reason at all. So there we have 3 loaves. You can see this one's a little smaller. That's okay. And sometimes they'll hold their shape and stay in a mound. When the dough is cold, I really like to refrigerate the dough, because when the dough is cold, it will hold its shape better. And if you've ever made sourdough and it just flattens out and covers the bottom of the pan and then raises a little bit and you've got a nice flat bread. But I want puffy loaves. So here we go. And you can see that all I'm doing is, as I'm turning, I'm just tucking it in underneath. Okay, there we've got our 3 loaves. So now we need to put some oil into the Dutch oven so that your bread doesn't stick. Or you'll end up with a cute little thing like I had today. I will show you that it's not all perfect. Today, I took this loaf out of the pan, but this part stuck, so I didn't get enough oil in it. So you want your loaf to just kind of slide out. So I'm just putting avocado oil. You can use olive oil. I do not use the cheaper oils because I want all the ingredients to be healthy. And so we're just oiling the pans so that those loaves will just slide out when they're done. And I'm going to use this to scoop it off the counter. So it's just going to go in the pan. And then this one. And then we have one more pan to just put some oil. I wouldn't suggest using paper towel. Some people use paper towel to grease their pans, but then you end up having little bits of paper that comes off into the loaf, so into the dough. So when I'm greasing the pan, I do not use like a bristly brush kind of instrument. I use this silicone one because I can put this in the dishwasher and it just cleans up really easily, and I don't have residue of oil. It's clean for the next time. So just making sure that all the sides are fully oiled, and then we have our last little loaf to go in. And once it rises, it's going to rise in this pan for 90 minutes. So you do have lots of rising. You've got your first 9 hours, which you can make this at night, go to bed, wake up early in the morning. That's what I usually do. And come out. The first thing I do is form my loaves. And then I've got 90 minutes to wait. And then I go do everything else that I'm going to do in the morning. So now we're just going to do a simple scoring technique that I do with a pair of scissors. I know lots of people do the artistic razor blade approach, but I'm just going to show you a simple slit, slit, slit. And then come this way. Put leaves on your branch, you can. After you have scored your loaves, you're going to put it in a cold oven at 425 for 45 minutes. And then you're going to open your oven, take the pots out, take the lids off, put them back in the hot oven at 425 for 15 additional minutes. So there's a full hour of baking time, 45 minutes with the lids on, and the last 15 with the lids off. And here we have our loaves, and they turned out beautifully. I love them because instead of spreading out like they do with a 90-minute raise, they'll get wider and fill up the bottom of the pan. Instead, they rose up. So putting them into a cold oven at 425 made them raise, and you can see how nice and rounded that loaf is. Here are the finished loaves. All of them were scored the same, but you can see that they all look different. So there's those three, and then these three. Okay, so we want you to hear the sound of this, and my daughter has promised to eat it if I crush it. So I just want you to hear. There you go. That's crispy. I flattened it a little bit. You don't do that with your loaf before you eat it, but we just wanted you to hear for sound effect that this is very crispy and crunchy, but it's so soft on the inside. We want every loaf to be loved. And I think I mentioned the story about how my mom always tied satin hair ribbons in our hair when we were little girls. She said that little girls that wore hair ribbons looked loved. So I just wanted to add that touch of a satin bow to each loaf. These are all dedicated to my mom, just making this bread in her honor and passing on that legacy of love. Next, we're going to do sourdough cinnamon rolls, and that is going to be so much fun. It's getting to be winter, it's starting to rain, there's a fire in the fireplace, there's candles glowing, and now we're going to do cinnamon rolls. Okay, this is a totally different recipe. It's a very sticky dough, so you're going to want to make sure that your hands are floured when you touch it. And I'm not going to put this all out onto the counter, but it is sticky dough. And then as I add the flour to it, it becomes the perfect consistency. I can make jumbo ones or I can make mini ones. The mini ones are fun because you don't feel guilty when you eat 3. And the jumbo ones, you feel guilty when you eat 1. It's really funny. I've got everything set up with the brown sugar filling with cinnamon and butter already done. And I like to get everything ready before I start because then I don't have to stop and do all these extra steps. There is slightly a little bit of yeast in these, but not much. Just a little bit of yeast. There's butter in this, and you want this to be spread out, a perfect little rectangle. Now we're gonna get the filling, brown sugar, cinnamon, and butter melted. And just spread it evenly, especially to the edges, because you want your cinnamon roll to have that yummy filling in the center. The center is my favorite part. So when I make mini ones, they're all just centers. This is a clean counter. I washed it with soap and water before I started. And just getting all of that good stuff all over. It's not about pretty, it's just about getting it everywhere. And here's pecans. You can use walnuts. You can use any kind of nut you want. I don't really measure. These are the raisins. And just getting the raisins all over. My brother-in-law loves these, so I do these for Dell and Mike with the raisins. Okay, and now we're going to start rolling. Everybody's rolled cinnamon rolls before. You just want to make sure that the good stuff is all the way to all the edges. If it sticks to the counter, that's okay. Just scoop it up. Some people use a thread to cut them. You can see this is a very long little loaf of cinnamon roll. I love to use these silicone. It makes cleaning up super easy. I love this knife, so I'm just going to set those on the little cookie sheet. Those are going to raise quite a bit, so I do them 3. These may look like they're medium sized to you now, but they will grow. And making sure that they're all about the same size as far as the same width so that they cook evenly. And there we have a pan of 15. Now these will raise over here, and we'll start another pan with what was left over of this roll, and then we'll just keep going because I've got lots of dough. Tomorrow the nurses at the hospital where I work are getting cinnamon rolls for Halloween. I am going to tuck this little one right there. Okay, that's the cinnamon rolls. Okay, now these have risen and they're ready to go in the oven at 350 for 25 minutes. But I do check them at 20 minutes because I want them to just be a bronze color. So keep checking them starting at 20 minutes because just depending on the size, you're going to want to check and make sure that nothing's burning. Okay, here we go. Here they are, the finished product. There's the frosting right there, and I love using almond extract. Now this one is a little bit light, so I'm gonna leave those in the oven to brown a little more. And we're gonna put this little guy in there. You can see how those raised. And so there we go. 20 minutes for the one on the bottom. And then on the top, about 5 more minutes to make sure that it's toasty like the other one. Okay, now for frosting. I do like to let these rest a little bit longer because otherwise this is just gonna melt right into the top and make a glaze. But we're gonna let that happen today. And when people purchase these, I include containers of frosting because everybody likes a different amount of frosting, and they're sweet because they've got a lot of brown sugar in them. So I will frost these few, and then we will let the other ones rest. That's 2 cubes of butter, 4 cups of powdered sugar, a little dash of vanilla, and a teaspoon of almond, and a 1/4 teaspoon of salt. So that's the frosting, and this is so yummy. So do we have any takers? Do you want one?
This is the best sourdough bread I've ever had. It is delicious.